In this video, I decided I'm going to go over some basics of guerrilla warfare. So in this, I'm going to be looking at and reading to you some doctrine from history. I'm going to dig up this information every once in a while, try doing one of these videos and then posting them under Fieldcraft. The first one I'm going to do here will be from Britain during World War II, the doctrine for the British Auxiliaries. This is the 9 points of the Guerilla's Creed by Colin Gubbins from the book The Art of Guerrilla Warfare, which was issued out to the auxiliaries. From my understanding, every time that the auxiliaries reported for training, when they did training, the first thing they did is they read the 9 points of the Guerilla Creed as reinforcement to them. This is basic doctrine. I will read you the 9 points, and I will probably have some notes or explanations a little bit on these. So the first one is surprise first and foremost, by finding out the enemy's plans and concealing your own intentions and movements. Operational security. That's a basic on everything. Don't let your enemy know what you're doing, but do your best to find out what he's doing so that you can counter it. Second, never undertake an operation unless certain of success owing to careful planning and good information. Break off the action when it becomes too risky to continue. You don't want a Pyrrhic victory, basically. It doesn't matter if you win the battle, you succeed in the operation, and all you've done is depleted your resources and cost you a large portion of your force. So you want to thoroughly plan out your operations. Go over those courses of actions. If the enemy does this, we do this. And you go through that. Give yourself at least a half dozen of those courses of actions. And then work those out. How will you respond to it if they do this? So when you're on the ground, the enemy reacts a certain way. You've already decided how you're going to counter that. And if it looks like the mission is turning against you, the enemy is countering you quicker, more effectively than you can counter it, break contact, get out of the area, regroup. There's no reason to continue fighting if it's guaranteed you will lose. All you're going to do is you're going to wipe yourself out. Third, ensure that a secure line of retreat is always available. Pretty basic. Before you do any type of operation, have your lines of retreat, your fallback lines already scouted out, already decided on. Everyone knows where those routes are and where they're supposed to meet up at the end. You don't want to be in a situation where you're in the best location for doing the ambush, but if things go wrong, you have no way to get out of there, so that the enemy turns your ambush site into their kill zone. They completely wipe you out. Always have a means of escape, preferably multiple means of escape. Fourth, choose areas and localities for action where your mobility will be superior to that of the enemy, owing to better knowledge of the country and lighter equipment, etc. If your enemy, an explanation on this, if your enemy is heavy and very strong on the mechanized side, they have motorized vehicles, MRAPs, they have armor, they have tracked vehicles. Draw their troops into terrain where they cannot employ those vehicles. If they're very heavy with drones and aircraft, pull their troops into areas where you have a lot of overhead cover that will conceal you. Always try to outmaneuver your enemy. Draw them into terrain that is advantageous for you, not as advantageous for them. Fifth, confine all movements as much as possible to the hours of darkness. This isn't as important as it used to be. Nowadays, there's a lot of night vision, there's a lot of thermals out there. If you're going to move around in the daytime, though, I would recommend you do the gray man thing. You're wearing civilian clothes, you're not carrying weapons, all that stuff is concealed, preferably already on location near where you're going to do your operation. So you're traveling there as a gray man, as a civilian, with believable papers, identity cards, whatever. Then you get to that area, that's when you arm up, you gear up, put your uniforms on, do your operation, and then you pull out. Try to do your movements at night, but be advised. You know, most modern armies now, they have the equipment. They can see in the dark just as well as they can in the daytime. Is there ways to counter that? Yes. Heavy vegetation helps considerably. Okay, sixth, never engage in a pitched battle unless in overwhelming strength and thus sure of success. You don't want to go toe-to-toe with your enemy, you know, on even grounds. If you do that, you're more than likely going to get wiped out, because they will have the advantage. They will have more combat multipliers like artillery, helicopters, drones, heavy weapons, where the guerrilla for the most part is going to be more lightly armed. He's going to have rifles, pistols, shotguns, submachine guns, some general purpose machine guns, some light machine guns. He's not going to have as much access to heavy weapons. He might have access to some light mortars, 60 millimeter, maybe up to 82 millimeter, but he's not going to have access to that heavy artillery. He's not going to have access to air support. So never get caught in a pitched battle. Don't try going toe to toe. Seventh, avoid being pinned down in a battle by the enemy's superior forces or armament. Break off the action before such a situation can develop. Same as in a pitched battle. You do not want to get pinned down in one particular area, locked in one particular area. You want to always be maneuverable. You always want to have that escape route that you can get out of there. If it looks like the enemy's getting ready to close it off, cut off those lines of escape, you better be working on ways to break out. Even if it's busting down into two-man teams or individuals to bust through the enemy's lines to break out and then reform behind his lines to continue the engagement. Don't get pinned down in a location for long enough that they can drop artillery on top of you, for long enough that they can start dropping ordnance on you from aircraft. Number 8, retain the initiative at all costs by redoubling activities when the enemy commences countermeasures. Not exactly recommended. Under British Auxiliary doctrine, they were supposed to just keep fighting until wiped out. A common thing in guerrilla warfare is when your enemy attacks, you retreat. When they retreat, you attack. If they're starting to heavily increase their counterinsurgency activities, find a way to work around it. It might be you go to ground for a little while, for a week, 2 weeks, a month, and then you go back on the offensive when the enemy thinks they've been successful in wiping you out, while in actuality you've been in hiding. And maybe if the opportunity arises, if they're doing counterinsurgency operations that are preventing you from doing large operations, go to smaller operations at that point. Go back to sniping, taking out 1 or 2 people on a patrol, sniping off someone from the walls and guard towers around a forward operating base. Setting off a few IEDs to mess up a convoy, make them think that there's an ambush there when all it is one person who's popping off the 2 IEDs, and then he takes off. Find a way to work around what the enemy's doing, but still cause him some damage, and definitely to keep his anxiety levels high. And the 9th one here, when the time for action comes, act with the greatest boldness and audacity. The partisan's motto is valiant but vigilant. Basically, when the fight begins, you're in the fight. Don't hold anything back. Fight for all you're worth. Take out the enemy as quickly as you can, as horribly as you can, to lower their morale. When your morale starts to sag, try to find ways to bring it back up. Little things do help out with that. Little comfort things like hot chow, full night's sleep, a little bit of rest, a day or two off the line where you're just kicking back, resting. Maybe throwing around a football, kicking around a soccer ball, whatever is available to you. And then you get right back in the fight. You fight as boldly as you can, as hard as you can, as heroically as you can. But don't do it stupidly where you're just being suicidal. So that's the first of the guerrilla warfare basics. These can be found online. I printed this off. I think it's from the Coles Hill website. I will put a link in the description. This is from the book written by Colin Gubbins, The Art of Guerrilla Warfare. If you want to look it up, I do recommend you get a hold of some of these older manuals, these older books, from basically the golden era of guerrilla warfare, where everything that happens now evolved from. Go back there, look at how they do it, see how you can adapt it for your own operations. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot and Militia movements, always remember, essay ons.